Right.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Oh, look, my camera just turned off. Immediate technical difficulties. I'm Jack. Welcome. This is Talk Openly. I'm so happy to be here with my temple friend, Daniel. We're part of Lions Road Dharma Center in Sacramento. And yeah, we're glad that you're listening tonight. Daniel, it's great to see you.
Hi,
So glad
Jack.
that
It's nice to
you're
see you too. I got my cup of tea here
great.
in my green Tara cup.
Oh,
Uh,
cute.
yes, I'm happy to be here on Talk Openly with you, and yeah, excited as I always am to see how the show unravels and or what it unravels.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll see. I think tonight will be interesting to talk about this purification practice of the four opponent powers. We're actually starting a four-part series where we're going to look at each of the opponent powers for purifying negative actions. So
Can you
we're
believe
going to
we're
be
doing a
starting.
four-parter on this?
We're doing a four-parter.
Like, I mean, we're really going to go deep into it, right? Because I like when like, it's pretty easy to just say, oh, well, these are the opponent powers, and this is how you practice it. But like, I'm stoked because this is such an important practice. I'm stoked that we're like gonna focus on each one of them individually because I feel like my motivation, my intention that I'd like to kind of put out there is that as we go through these, I'm going to be practicing them. So this gives me 4 weeks of dedicated purification practice, which I think is going to be invaluable. It's,
Yeah.
it's already started because I've already started, it's kind of begun for me, right? Like thinking about it, focusing on it. But I'm super excited that we're going to have this opportunity to like be with it sort of week after week. And like, yeah, it's going to be really helpful. I can feel it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think this is one of those practices where um if you really allow yourself to kind of dig in, it can be transformational.
Yes.
And as you'll see, we'll talk a little bit about it, the practice as a whole. But Venerable Robina, who is a nun, is a very cool person, extremely sharp, and doesn't hold back. She says that you would be insane not to do this practice every single night, if you kind of knew like what it could do, right?
Yeah.
And if you had like real kind of faith in karma, you would want to do this every night. So yeah, I think this is going to be about a little bit about developing faith in karma for me to actually kind of light a fire for me to actually do this training, this practice. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this, Daniel.
I don't want to be insane anymore.
God, yeah, yeah,
I'm
I'd like
tired of
to.
it. I'm
I'm
tired
tired
of
of it
being
too.
insane. Let's purify the insanity.
Yeah, that sounds great. Um, yeah, that's what it's all about, huh?
That's right.
Coming back to reality.
That's right.
Sweet. How are
I don't
you
know. It's nice to
doing?
see you. I'm good. I'm good. It's nice to see you relaxed. I like.
I
Not that
know.
you are like. I just mean like your posture, like the environment. Like it's nice. It's chill. I dig it.
Yeah, I'm hanging out in my bed because my cat took my chair. I'm looking at him right now, and yeah, he likes to usurp my spaces
Well,
because
he
he's a cat. So
well, it is his divine right, and
that's right.
we should acknowledge that we're just here
Absolutely.
in his world.
Exactly. His kingdom.
Yeah, boy, I don't know. Things are pretty good here. Like, it's been interesting, and my practice has been deepening with longer meditations. Like I mentioned last time, Lama had given me some advice to extend my meditative periods,
Right.
and I'm really grateful that life has allowed me to make that time and space. Right, it's working out. And I had this really magical kind of experience the other day. I mentioned I've been having some conflict at work. It remains unresolved, actually. But there was
Mm,
like, kind of ongoing fighting going on and on more perpetuating harm. And it was, making things worse, getting kind of off kilter with no signs sort of letting up. And I woke up one day early in the morning. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get in there and meditate. And I had this, oh my God, it was like so much energy. Like it's early, and like I'm supposed to be tired and mellow and relaxed, but I was super agitated. And I couldn't,
mm,
like, I'm sitting there for a long time and I was doing I was doing like Tonglen and I was really like, it was an energetic practice, but I could see like how incredibly mm, distracted I was, right? How I was like really spinning in this sort of samsaric cycle, right?
mm,
And I was like, it was helpful, but it wasn't, I was like, what, good. I'm glad I did the practice, but it was one of those things where I was just very aware of where I was at. And then the very next day, I did the exact same thing happen, right? And I woke up and I sit down to meditate, and it's still same agitation. And I was like, man, I'm freaking pissed, right? I'm so mad right now. Like, and
mm,
like I could see, I was like, yeah, I can argue, I can justify, I can all these things, right? But like, I'm really freaking mad. Like, I'm like, this anger was palpable, right? And I'm sitting there in meditation. I'm like, God damn fucking anger. And
yeah.
then, and then I remembered Thich Nhat Hanh talking about holding our anger like a little baby. And
Yeah.
I remembered this, and I remembered how you can hear his voice, right? If you've ever heard him talk, you can hear him talking so soft,
Mhm.
so gentle, so full of love, right? And I
Mm,
remember how he explained, he said it's a lot like holding a baby, like if a mother has a baby that's crying, she holds it. She doesn't ask the baby, like, what's wrong with you? How did you get like this? Why are you
yeah.
doing this? None of that, right? Like, she just simply picks the baby up and holds it. And then before too long, she can very easily determine what the problem is and then resolve it, right? Baby's got a dirty diaper, baby needs some food, whatever, right? And so like we can do the same thing with our afflictive emotions. And
Mm,
I was like, okay, this is Thich Nhat Hanh is like coming in and giving me a direct teaching right now. This is amazing, right? And thankfully it was early on in the meditative period because I already knew like I already knew what was going on here, right? I could see it.
yeah.
I just went through this yesterday. I don't want to do this again. Got to try something different. And so I held my anger in non-judgmental awareness with compassion and tenderness, very gently, just sat with it and just felt it, looked at, like, just let it be, like I didn't mess with it too much. I just felt it. And what was really beautiful was like how it revealed itself, right? Like how
Mm,
kind of like it like by sitting with it, it actually allowed this clarity to emerge about my true intentions and how I wanted to be in this world, right? How I want to relate to other people. And I could see the difference between sort of like continuing on with this sort of cyclical behavior,
yeah.
um, which I thought and I still believe I have a right to. Don't get me wrong. I was still I'm entitled to my conceptualization of all of this, whatever, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
in the moment, like it was really beautiful to watch that emerge, to be with it, watch it sort of fade away. Anger did what it came to do. I was able to sort of get the message. And then to see the results of that, like in it just practical sense, both in terms of my own state of mind, which was incredibly peaceful and not angry and not, it was actually tender and soft and very,
Mm,
very loving, after allowing the anger to be there and to be with it. And it led to very, I think, intelligent actions with regard to sort of the conflict that give some sign that it's getting resolved now, where I could only have exacerbated the problem. And that was a really beautiful experience. And it happened to be tied into a similar sort of deep, deep experience related to work and attachment. And
mm,
it was a really profound during over the course of this last week. I had a relatively profound realization about my own relationship to work and how
mm.
and about, like how I identification, all this stuff that had happened, like where I had a lot of energy tied up into it, right? And the result was a true sort of letting all of it go, letting all of these ideas, concepts, or whatever. And it was a radical sort of flushing, right? This wasn't just like a little like, oh yeah, I know, let it go. Like it felt like it was like cathartic release of like
Mm,
all these stories and all this nonsense that had been cluttering my mind and whatever. And then as a result of that release over multiple days now, like I have so much more processing power. Like I like even like at work, I'm like, dude, no problem. I got this. I can do good, smart things all day long, right? Because I don't have this heavy load of all this stuff that I wasn't letting go, right?
yeah.
But by letting go of all the things that I didn't need to be holding on to, it provided a lot more capacity, right? So now I'm
Mm.
like, oh man, yeah, I can handle all of this stuff. No big deal.
That reminds me a lot of what Lama was saying on Sunday during his talk about Salung and
Yeah.
like the winds and channels and drops and whatnot, and how Tara practice is kind of like a loom practice, like kind of building up the winds, that kind of like motivating force, kind of that energy that we
That's
can
right.
call upon when we cultivate it, and that you know through that like kind of dropping, right, of that stuff that is not helpful at all. It's just
Yeah.
self-centered garbage
Yeah.
um that just keeps us kind of looping on the same old track. And so it sounds like, by dropping that, there was almost this immediate kind of like wind, this kind of like
Yeah.
energy to build
I
your
it's
sails.
funny that you mentioned this. This was not scripted or anything. Just
Yeah.
what it was worth. But that was that aspect of it was directly related to Tara practice. Like I could like it was as a result of Tara practice that the dropping sort of happened, and I could
Mm,
see the relationship between the two. So Tara was in fact swift and very compassionate. It's amazing how quickly she can act.
yeah. Right.
If we let her, if
Yeah.
we let her.
If we let her, yeah. Do you recognize, so you were able to kind of drop some of the identity stuff. Have you also done tarot practice with your anger? Like you were holding your anger?
No, no, I
Yeah.
sure haven't. No, no,
Mm,
no. The way, it was interesting. Remember when we had Geshe Sewang on, and he was talking about Tara practice and about the thoughts, like how we would um, use our mind along with reciting the mantra, right? And the three things that stood out to me, what he said, what I remember him saying anyway, was that as we're reciting the mantra, that what we're wishing for is this sort of for sentient beings to be, including ourselves, to be released from fear, to have their dualistic conceptualizations fade, dissipate, to clarify, and that they be in good health, body, mind,
mm,
in balance and in health. And so as I'm doing the mantras, I'm doing this, and what's really interesting is like how the very first part of that, the fear part, it was actually the thing. They're all related, right? Clearly related, but it was that fear part that sort of Tara like shined a light on the grasping nature, like the fear involved in what was going on for me, right? What I was
mm,
holding on to. That in fact, this like grasping was fear-based, right?
yeah.
And so by seeing its emptiness, by seeing the rest of it, by seeing like, nah, it's not the way that I think it is, right? And then being able to like clearly see it more clearly, it
Yeah.
allowed for a lot of that stuff to drop. And my sense is it's not coming back. I mean, something else, I'm sure I'll develop other sort of, dirt, so to speak, I'm sure. But some of that stuff, I don't think it's coming back.
Cool. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Hell
That's
yeah.
something to celebrate.
It is, it is. So I think that I feel like I have like even though like whatever my day is not like particularly blessed, you know what I mean? Like it's not like lots of highs and happiness or whatever, like I think like I'm like, dude, this is good. I'm all
Yeah.
right.
Hell yeah. Glad to
Yeah.
hear it. Good
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I'm happy to share those with you. They both meant a lot to me, and they both happened over the course of the last week. The anger
Yeah.
one was in particular something that kind of caught me by surprise. I don't like so many other people, I don't actually pay much attention to my anger. I just react.
Mm,
And so you know, seeing it and having it like right in front of me, like it was so crystal clear, like having
yeah.
it like that was a real blessing, right? And then watching how it transforms, right? Like that's the magic, right? That's the magic of Tantra.
Mm,
That's the magic of these practices is this transformation where something that seems like typically, like we would think like, oh, we want to avoid anger, we don't want to be angry. And nah, that anger was serving a purpose and it was a pure energy. And like being with it in a more skillful manner than in times past, I was like, oh, right. I can see what's going on here. It's helpful.
mm-hmm,
There wasn't
mm-hmm.
anything bad about the energy of anger.
Yeah. And you didn't lash out, right? There was no kind of reaction to that feeling, just kind of, yeah, I'm gonna feel it. Gonna
Yeah.
notice
Like,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
notice the texture, notice the
that's
the
the part.
temperature.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
the
it.
whole
It becomes a
experience.
work of art, right?
Um,
Because you're looking at it, you're like, oh my God, like this is all happening in me. And then you also, you can't help, at least for me, the cognitive aspect of it, where I'm like, wow, it's really weird how this is totally my doing, right? Like this is not outside of me. This
yeah.
feeling didn't come from anything else, right? Sure there is this interconnected aspect, right? There is this sort of like everything played a part in the arising of this anger that I claim as mine, right?
Mm,
But but there was something very freeing in kind of just seeing it and like experiencing it, like truly being mindful. Just like I was telling the story about eating the chocolate peanut butter ice cream last week, right?
yeah.
I got to do that, but I got to do it with anger instead of with chocolate
Mm,
peanut butter ice cream. I would
kind of
say that
savor it.
I would say that the savoring experience was better with the anger. I think anger actually tastes better than chocolate peanut butter
Mm,
ice cream. Like I'm just saying from this, where I'm like, yeah, like it was so rich. It was so,
yes.
oh my God, it was beautiful.
Wow, very cool. Well, I'm
Decadent, you could
inspired.
say. I was
Yeah.
indulging in my anger.
Indulging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And yeah, that it doesn't need to be just our second nature, like you were kind of saying, where it just kind of we don't even feel separate from our anger a
Oh,
lot of times. But if we can just kind of observe it and see like that's something that I can actually savor in a way I can have a relationship with it rather than be controlled by it or consumed by it. So
yeah.
very cool.
It's so cool. So cool.
That is the magic of Tantra.
It really is. This transformation, it's surprising,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for
If we
sure.
allow it, if we do the practice and if we allow it, right, then, it can't help but yield fruit.
Yeah, most definitely.
It's just the nature of the path.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Science.
that's my world. It's pretty groovy, all in all, right? It's good. It's
Yep.
still working it and still seeing results and committed to the practice. So there's that.
Oh
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What about you?
Cool. Um, yeah, I mentioned before we started the show, I've definitely been I keep an eye on the news, right?
Yeah.
And it is not a good time in our
Mm-mm.
world.
No,
And
this is when the rat should be fleeing the ship, so to speak.
right, yeah, yeah, it feels that intense, you know. And so I'm definitely I'm trying to come back as much as I can to what I can do right now. And I have a great job where I'm helping people all day. That's a lot. I'm volunteering on the weekends, I'm doing things that are good for my community, and I need to remind myself of that, of what's actually in my control. Um, and then just try and be kind as much as possible. I'm really um trying to cultivate that with everyone that I see is just how can I be kind? Um, so trying to keep my teacher close, right, in my mind as much as possible. Um, but otherwise, I do, I'm experiencing, I think, a re-centering back into my Dharma practice. And, um, I haven't gone anywhere, but I know we talked a couple times back about kind of being on that like ellipsis kind of rotation around the training where it's like, I felt far away.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a lot that was pulling me away that I was, allowing myself to be pulled away by. Um, and I think, tonight's going to be an interesting conversation in terms of that because I just see clearly just how habituated I am to attachment, right? And uh aversion, these it's like my mind I could watch and see my mind slipping, right? Um and I have been focusing a lot on my Dharma name, which I know I've talked about, Yeshi Laki, which is goddess of joy. And it just that theme keeps coming back in the last couple weeks where it's like, dude, you really need to be cultivating like taking joy in other people's good qualities.
Mhm.
Like uncenter this, right? Like this is getting me in trouble. This is
Yeah.
getting me in really painful places. I have enough evidence of that now, right? Like, but it just, even more now because of kind of recent like interpersonal stuff. I just am like, wow, yeah, this whole self thing is not working out. And so I've been really actively over the last week, especially with people who I maybe feel annoyed by or jealous of, envious of. I immediately try and use that as a cue to say, okay, what are their good qualities? Like, what are they displaying right now that is actually like really positive? Or if I can't find something like right away, it's like, okay, well, they have a nice smile, or just something maybe a little bit more shallow, right? But ideally, kind of looking at how they're, yeah, what kind of qualities they're bringing into the world that express Buddha nature.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it's just such a beautiful practice, and really turns the mind uh, towards others and away from my self-centeredness.
Oh, I love
Um,
that, especially that aspect of if you remember that a court like sort of like on the one hand you remember, oh hey, part of this this doctrine, if you will. It has to do with Buddha nature that is inherent in all beings, right? And then you can just sort of like ask, like, is it true? Is it true for me, right? Is it true that I see this? If I do, I believe it's true. Then you're like, yeah, I do think that's true. Yeah, I do. I'm Buddhist and I believe that. Okay, that's nice. Look, look at the Buddha in front of you, this annoying whatever wretched person. Look at this Buddha. Do you see him? Right? And that's such a like that practice is so difficult.
mhm, mhm.
I'm happy that you're doing it because it does do the right thing to the mind, but that's why it's so hard.
That is why it's so hard. Yeah, for sure. And I have been doing a little bit of kind of the practice that you did with holding your anger in terms of my jealousy or suspicion, envy, just kind of really trying to feel the feeling um, extracted from any content, right? Because it's really
Yeah.
easy to get wrapped up in the content, like maybe, your work stuff that caused
Oh,
anger, or like my
oh,
relationship stuff that causes
right.
jealousy. And so it's really easy to get into that narrative and the story. But if I can, separate that and just say, okay, I'm just feeling the physical quality, the emotional quality, and not going down the rabbit hole, then it's a
Mm,
whole other experience. And so, yeah, that's been interesting as well. And it really, it doesn't take long for it to subside.
no,
That's what's
no.
so interesting, is that like if I just don't allow myself to go down that rabbit hole, the narrative, and just feel the feeling, um, it cuts, like it cuts pretty quick. But right, yeah, it's fascinating. And yeah, it's been interesting for me as like someone who works in mental health because um, part of me has been like, well, I want to engage with the jealousy. I want to engage with that feeling because like I want to know what it wants. I want to like figure it out, right? I want to know the
Yeah,
origin, the source. But actually, that has not been helpful. And sometimes I think there might be like a way that can be helpful. But actually for me right now, it's just about no. Like I'm not going into that narrative. I can feel it. I can feel the emotional
yeah,
quality, but I'm not allowing that narrative to happen. It's
right.
not helpful.
It's not
Uh,
it's not helpful. And you can
yeah,
see when you're mindful, you can see, oh, the narrative has no truth. Like
yeah,
I might believe some of it and think that some of it is factual or whatever, but the narrative itself is not and could not ever be the truth of what's happening,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
and that I did actually have that exact experience that you're talking about. I did have that in relationship to work because I work with my dear brother, right? So like,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been together for a long time, and so like, there's all kinds of charged emotions in there and all kinds of narratives and stuff. And it was, in fact, I have to say this, like it was. I mean, we were like probably one of the most sort of conflicted periods in our history working together.
Mm,
Not probably, it is the most, right? And so as a result of this, it's supercharged, and I could see that I was beginning to become suspicious. Like you said that word, and I was like, yep, that's right. I'm being
mm,
suspicious. Why was I suspicious? Well, I doubted his goodness. I thought, oh,
mm,
he's all this, he's all that, and they're doing this, and it was all just none of it based in any kind of truth. It was all just some kind of a monkey mind narrative that was going
yeah,
on. And what I had to remind myself first was what I just said, like what we were talking about, is like, actually, do you believe that does he have Buddha nature? Does he? And what that did, just that asking that question and saying like, well, actually, I know he does. I guarantee I know he does. Okay,
yeah,
well, where is it? How is it that things are so off here, right? And that process of recognizing, no, actually, let me start with the assumption of his goodness, and let me recognize that we harm each other because of our ignorance, right? Because of our kleshas, because of and we're all in it. We're all doing the same kind of thing, and we don't want to be doing it, but we are doing it.
yeah,
Okay, well, if we recognize that, then what can we do? Well, we can stop our role in all of that,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And I love that.
Medicine.
That's the medicine. It sure is kind of bitter at times, though.
Yeah.
You
Hell
know,
yeah. I would definitely say that.
I want to give everybody else the med. You take that. You take it.
For sure, right? So much easier to see in other people when they need it.
Right.
Well, hey, let's do some mind training.
Let's
Let's
do
do some
it.
medicine, right?
We're going for some medicine right now on the
Yeah.
Random Lojong slogan page on lionsroardharmacenter.org.
Okay, don't fluctuate. You should not vacillate in your enthusiasm for practice. If you sometimes practice and other times do not, that will not give birth to certainty in the Dharma. Therefore, don't think too much. Just concentrate one pointedly on mind training. And that was Choyam Trungpa in Training the Mind, cultivating loving kindness. Don't fluctuate. Don't vacillate. Just
No,
practice. Just do
no,
it.
no. And
I like
this
that.
is,
That's
I think it's actually directly related to what we're talking about tonight. Um, because regret is sort of oftentimes misunderstood or thought of in conjunction with like guilt or bad feelings or shame or
Yeah.
that kind of thing, sort of negative self-image, whatever. Um, and in my own experience, I've noticed that, and I've had this trouble a decent amount where I have some of that, right? Where I'm like, oh, I'm bad because I did
Yep.
something I slipped up or I shouldn't have done that or whatever. And that makes me a bad person. I'm not redeemable or whatever. Like I'm in a bad funk right now. I can't do this, whatever. And that sort of all of that extra narrative, it's just more conceptual thinking about issues or problems has caused me to be like, I'm not going to do this. In fact, I remember going to Lama one time and just saying, I'm done. I quit meditating. I quit all of this. I'm over it.
Yeah.
Because if I can't actually do it, if I'm not willing to do this 100% the right way, then what's the point? And he was like,
Mm,
okay, just that's just a conceptual trap. It's called perfectionism. Don't worry, everybody does it, but it's not
yeah.
helpful. And so along the way, multiple times he's had to remind me, like, just just keep doing it. Just
Yeah.
keep don't st especially when you think like, well, now's not the time. Well, that's the time,
That's
right?
the time. Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. I had an experience recently where I was feeling really angry about something. I don't remember what it was. It could have been anything, right? And the last thing I wanted to do was sit down and meditate
That's
because
right.
all I wanted to do was just go out and like, whatever it was, respond to
Yeah.
something, get my way, get the last word, right? And but I told myself, no, you are sitting your ass down and you are doing tar practice like right now.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it just even within sentences, right, of starting the sadhana, I felt that that ease and kind of, okay, here we are, fine. Yes, this works. And so it does, kind of having those moments where we can get that certainty that, okay, yes, this does work, can really cultivate enthusiasm and build that momentum, right? To keep
Yeah.
going. So
Yeah.
yeah, just do it.
Just do it. When you were describing that, I was laughing because I was just thinking like how many times I've had that experience, where like I'm like, just sit down and do it, and then that part that you described where you're like, okay, fine, I'm here, I'm doing it. And then you're like, there's a funny part that I sometimes notice when I like there's this part of me that's still sort of chafing at the recognition that it's working. Like
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
actually like
100%.
I'm just like, I'm kind of mad. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, now it's actually taking away all of this
Yeah.
thing that was mine, that was
Yeah.
me.
So that thing actually wasn't that important. Fine.
Yeah, and the other part about this other part about not fluctuating that I find really fascinating is once we give birth to some faith, some confidence in the Dharma, it does sort of beg the question of whether or not we really want what we say we want here, right?
Yeah.
Because there are these times where, like, if you know for a fact, whatever, right now you're raging and you're gonna be distracted, and you can see all of that, and then you're like, oh, and there's a practice that I can do to prevent all of that harm and to do the right thing. I know it, I know for a fact it'll work, but you just don't really. And then you're like sitting there, and you're like, do you actually want to be enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings? Did you mean that, or
Right.
were you just sort of like mouthing that? Like, what did you
Right.
think was gonna happen here?
Right, for sure. Right. That we could have like our ridiculous afflictions and deliberation at the same time.
Oh, can we have them both?
Can we have them both?
No.
Look at this. This is gorgeous.
It is pretty. This is a big old Tonka with the seventh Bodhisattva.
Well, gorgeous.
Cool.
Yeah, every Lojong slogan comes with a piece of art, so check it
We should
out.
turn them in. We
It's
should make
fantastic.
trading cards out of them.
Oh, that's a great idea. I love that. I wonder if that's okay.
Probably not. You have to get permission.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Yeah, thanks so much already for our conversation. I feel like um, yeah, I'm feeling more motivated already to start my week. It feels like I don't know, talk
Yeah.
openly kind of
Yeah,
starts my
it
week of
it
Dharma.
does. Yeah, it feels that
Not that
way.
it ends, but Um, so yeah, let's jump in. Let's jump into the four opponent powers.
Yeah, you want to tell what are all four of them?
So it kind of it depends on the who teaches it because sometimes they're in a different order, but
That's
it
right.
always starts with regret. No matter what, it's always going to start with regret. And then the next one here is reliance, then remedy, and resolve. And we're going to get into the other three in following weeks. But the four opponent powers is this purification practice for negative actions and negative karma that we've developed over countless lifetimes. Um, and it's this process of kind of mentally reflecting on things that we've done, both in this life and in previous lives. We can kind of guess, right, that we've done all the things. And really taking time to recognize that those actions are not helpful and that they're actually propelling us in a direction that we don't want to go. Um, and so part of the four opponent practice that I need to work on is really having like faith in the fact that cause and effect is real, right? And that certain causes lead to definite effects. I think that's part sometimes where I'm like, I don't make the link, right? Where I'm like, I could like tell a white lie or kind of, yeah, be a little bit rude to someone or just, and it's like, it's no big deal, right? Like that's kind of like what my excuse comes up is that it's not
Yeah.
really that big of a deal, right?
Yeah.
Um, but with a real recognition of karma, you realize that like just one small kind of seed can grow into this big like oak tree of difficulties in the future. And so starting to develop faith in karma and that these things aren't just going to go away. Like these are momentous paths that we're creating for ourselves through our actions. And since they're habitual, they just get deeper,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like I was talking about earlier, where like I could see my mind go down these traps, these paths that were traps of jealousy, envy, and it was so easy, right? And
Yeah.
so there must have not just like my own kind of like this life experiences that have created some seeds for jealousy, but that past lives certainly I've had maybe some demigod realm experience where it's like every your whole world my whole world was jealousy, right?
Yeah.
And so these kind of habit patterns based off of those actions created in a moment in the heat of envy or whatever, um, creating the negative karma to continue to experience that and then continue to do those actions. And so the four opponent powers is really about recognizing I want to stop, like I no longer want to engage in those activities because I realize that they're sending me down a path I don't want to go. And I can also remedy, so I can do something to counteract the strength of the karma. I'm not necessarily going to erase it, right? Like I think that's actually pretty hard. But what we're doing, Venerable Children actually says in a talk, is that we're modifying how the karma will ripen. So maybe instead of growing into a big oak tree, it'll start growing a little shoot, and then some fire will come through, right? And like burn down that like little sprout
Yeah.
that came up,
Right.
right? And so there's, maybe instead of I don't know, your partner leaving you, you'll get like, I don't know, a cold or something, right? Like
Stub your
I'm not
toe.
making,
Step
yeah,
on a Lego.
right. You'll stub your toe. So that's kind of what we're looking at is like, okay, how can we lessen the effects of our negative actions and not just so that we experience good things in this life, but so that we can really um propel ourselves into good rebirths and keep doing this training so that we can benefit all beings. Um, and so the first one we're going to look at is regret. Do you want to tell us a little bit about regret? What kind of what you know about regret and yeah, how you feel about that word too? I'm curious.
Yeah. I don't I guess I don't have like I don't have a hard time with the word, but I do
Yeah,
recognize that it has this association with like guilt and shame and that kind of stuff. And those are my primary motivators, you know. So
I
so,
feel you.
so like there's a relationship, there's like what do you call it? Like a near enemy or something. What do they call that? Like the thing
Mm-hmm.
that's like it, but that is not it.
Yep.
Yeah, anyway. So yeah, we're not talking about guilt, we're not talking about shame or any of that, but just recognizing like we done fucked up.
Yep.
And we don't want to do that, right? Like we're like like we're just like sick of the trouble, right? Like once you start
Yes.
to look at it, you're like, oh, I can see how this cycle, it's not just that this cycle of rebirth is happening on like big levels, like, I'm going to be reborn and then the next life or whatever. It's actually happening all the time, day in and day out, right?
Yeah.
Constantly happening. And that they're driven by the like that cycle of suffering, right? Of how suffering gets created, that's our own doing through our own habitual tendencies, and we have a choice. It doesn't have to be that way, but for some reason we love creating samsara, right? Like we're just into it until we get sick of it, right? And I think regret is like the sick of it part of it, where you're just like,
Yeah.
okay, I can see how this stuff is arising. I can see it in how other people do it and it affects me. I can see how I do it and it affects other people. Okay, I can't control everybody else. Nothing I could do about those people out there, right? But
Mm,
I can stop my part in it, right? I have some kind of a role in all of this, right? And so
yeah.
to that end, I don't think regret's a problem at all. It's just this awareness of something that didn't turn out to be like a skillful, helpful action. And in some cases, it's even pre-action, right? Like in some cases, yeah, I recognize that the action is an important part of generating karma, right? But there is still an effect even from just holding on to some of these thoughts, right? Some of these concepts. Still an impression. There's still,
Mm,
at the very least, sometimes these harmful ways of thinking before we even act generate a negative state. I'll give you an example of this that,
yeah.
was really, I think, quite pertinent to my own little story that I was telling you earlier. So, in one of my angry states, I was trying to be diligent because I was like, I'm going to use nonviolent communication throughout all correspondence, right? And I think I may have told you how I do that. I use ChatGPT to help me with that.
Sweet. Yep.
It's a good use of the tool, big fan, right? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna just do this one though, where I'm just gonna vent. It's just me to ChatGPT, and I want it to tell me what a bad, I want to indulge in this. I
Yeah, yeah,
recognize that I'm not going to be harming another human being. Right? I was intentionally, it's sort of like mental masturbation or something, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
I was just gonna do this like I was gonna indulge in it for me, right?
yeah.
Knowing like I'm not actually gonna send this message to anybody else.
Yeah,
And what was really fascinating, I went ahead and did that. And then I felt gross. Like I was
yeah.
just like, that didn't make me feel better. Like playing with those thoughts and like doing all of that, like it made me feel really yucky, and I recognized that I hadn't even taken an action beyond the exchange with his AI or whatever, but it still hurt
Hmm.
me, and it hurt me in the moment. So yeah, karma, yes, next life or sometime in the future, yes, others, yes, all of that. But dude, like actually, these
Yeah,
problems are causing you distress in the moment now.
right. Right. Yeah, like can I see that this is not this self-centeredness is not benefiting me or anyone around me.
No.
Yeah, and that is interesting about how like um we can engage in actions that are just mental, right? That don't even have like kind of a direct material effect on the world
Hmm.
around us or on the people around us, but
Yeah.
there's some kind of engagement in our minds that can really turn the mind a certain way. And so to have regret for that too, where it's like, ooh, I don't want to indulge that. Like, I don't want to indulge that kind of obsession, right?
Right.
Because the obsession itself is a seed for continuing out that kind of karmic pathway.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. What we're talking about here is pretty simple, right? Like Lama says, the Indians discovered the power of repetition a long time ago. The thing is that we have repeated certain thoughts, behaviors, certain patterns, and
Yeah,
now that's what we do, and we think that's it, and we can't get out of it, and it's causing us all kinds of trouble or whatever, right? And okay, fine, we see now how we got there. But then there are these ways to use that same thing, use that same power, use that same force to turn things the other direction so that we're not doing the same thing that led to all this suffering in the first place. That's all this
yeah,
training, right?
right,
And so that's again though, it sort of begs the question, like, do I want that?
right. Like maybe I just want to stew in my bitterness
Yeah,
for
do
a
I want to
while.
stew in my bitterness? How's that feel?
Feels pretty bad.
Day after day after day. And then when we really begin, and then we're like practicing mindfulness while stewing in our bitterness. And then we get to see that, oh, when I
Right.
stew in my bitterness, then I look ugly in the mirror. I feel I wear clothes that don't look good or whatever. It doesn't,
Yeah.
whatever. I indulge in Ben and Jerry's or whatever. I do
Yeah.
these things. I snap at people. And then
Yeah.
you begin to see like, oh, I'm hurting myself and other people just by even just entertaining these thoughts.
Right, for sure. By allowing that narrative to, yeah, to dictate what you do. I think this really brought up for me why regret is so important. Um, you mentioned, uh, that sometimes we'll be sitting in meditation, just kind of like stewing in our own stuff. And, if we don't have regret about these actions of both, our body, our speech, and our mind, right? Then it will mean that not like the other things that we do that we're trying to be like virtuous or helpful, are somehow tainted
Yeah.
because we haven't like regretted those other actions or those past actions. We're kind of just like, oh, I don't know, like it's almost like this kind of false engagement, right? We're not
Yeah.
like I feel like I'm less authentically engaging with my training when I don't have regret for kind of like
Yeah.
the things that I did during the day that were kind of shitty,
Yeah.
like if I'm not actively thinking about that. And so regret, so even though in the four opponent powers, like uh sometimes they're out of order, um regret is always the first one,
It's the
because
gateway.
it's the gateway, exactly. If
Right.
you don't have regret, then the other powers,
Not gonna work.
they're not going to be powerful. They're
No.
not going to make any
There's
sense.
not even a point to them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, like why would any kind of remedy, like how could you have remedy or resolve
You
without
can only
really
remedy
think?
a wrong. If you don't think it was wrong, what are you
Right.
remedying?
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so the gate, right? The gate to purification
Yeah.
is regret.
I was thinking
Huh,
about it in terms of, because Vajrasattva purification practice is I near and dear to me.
me too.
And I was thinking about how like regret is like the key to Vajrasattva's kingdom, like
Ah,
where you're like you have to first have that. You can't, there's no way you're going to enter into that brilliant, amazing Vajrasattva reality, right? Without having that regret first, because that's
mm.
what leads you there.
So we mentioned, one thing that kind of keeps us from engaging in regret, and that's like, maybe we kind of want to
Yeah.
stay,
Mm,
right? We want to stay in it.
mm.
We're not actually sure that we
It's
want
juicy. Yeah.
liberation. Yeah. Another one I think is just kind of forgetfulness for me. Like
Yeah.
I'll just forget that, I'm actually, you know, on a path. So I'll just kind of I'll be a little bit lazy, right, with my application during the
You
day
think,
of like,
can I ask you, is it okay, so is it forgetting or is it avidya? Is it fundamental ignoring, right? Is it just like a lapse, like oopsie daisy, I sort of forgot, right? Or
mm,
is it more like sort of like I'm not judge, I'm just like wondering, like
hmm,
some I don't know, sometimes do you know where I'm getting where I'm going with this?
I'm not sure. Say more.
Mm, no, no, let's not. I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole. That's not worth it. Not worth
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Well, for me, it's like I'll just kind of like forget that I'm trying, like I'm actively trying to be generous and patient and kind,
Yeah.
so for me, it's a kind of laziness. Like I'm not actively, working on the Dharma trainings that I'm studying, right? I kind of just like
Yeah.
I sit down on the cushion, I read, I meditate, and then I'm like, okay, and now what's next? Instead
Mm,
of being like
hmm.
carrying it into the
Right.
world.
Right.
And not to say that I'm, not doing that all the time, but so I think laziness is sometimes a barrier to regret because I'm just kind of like not even thinking about it,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, I'm wondering like what else? What do you think is like a
Well, I mean,
barrier to
I
regret?
guess what I was kind of getting at was like
Yeah,
like if you're mindful, so if you're not mindful, it's easy to just sort of forget, like, and just, your habit patterns take over and you just do what you do and you're not thinking about this stuff or whatever. As you sort of like increase your mindfulness, your awareness, right? Then it sort of, I think we run into this like, well, I kind of like turning away from, like it's a little bit more like intentional. We
yeah,
know there's this practice. We know like the stewing and the bitterness or whatever it is that we're doing. We know on some deeper level that it's not quite right, but we're just gonna no, I'm just gonna distract myself with some busyness and some
yeah.
whatever, something else.
Do you think there's like some shame there? Like, oh, I don't want to acknowledge that I've done something that I regret.
Totally, a hundred
Yeah,
percent. I couldn't. Yes, I think that what happens. Mingyur Rinpoche actually talks about this. Where he talks about these two ways that people relate to their wrongdoing. One of which we've already discussed, one of which is ignoring it, right? Like just like if you try to bring up the wrongdoing, then it's just sort of like so it's so discomforting or uncomfortable that we just kind of like ignore, turn away, pretend like it's not there, think about something else, or we loop on it and we just loop
yeah,
and loop and loop and it becomes really super solid. And I thought, if you don't mind, now that I brought up Mingyur Rinpoche, he said
yeah,
something that I thought was quite beautiful related to regret. If you don't mind, I'm gonna
yeah,
just find
please.
where I wrote down his note here. All right, so he's talking about, okay, so here we go. Try looking directly at a troublesome activity without judgment. Don't try to understand, judge, or change it. Just review it. With the calm, abiding mind of shamatha, we watch the activity as if standing on the reviewing platform of a parade, or as if standing on the bank of a river without being carried away by the current. The story may have a lot of emotional force, but we apply the same meditation that we use for awareness with object. And this is my favorite part. I love this part. And remember, all this time, Vajrasattva sits just above our head, ready to support our every effort. He too is witnessing, but not judging. His kindness and compassion does not differentiate between victim and perpetrator. Seeing our innate purity, he aspires for us to see our innate purity, and his wish for all beings to attain enlightenment radiates without discrimination.
Beautiful.
Isn't
Yeah,
that
I love
gorgeous?
that.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
dude,
Yeah,
the imagery, I was like, that's so beautiful, right? Like we
yeah,
can bring up one of these troublesome things and we can be like,
totally.
oh my God, here's it. Oh, it's just sticky and it's just got shame
Yeah,
and guilt. And then we remember, oh, Vajrasattva's sitting there and he's not judging
yeah.
it.
He's not going anywhere, right?
Yeah,
Like we can bring it all up. And I think, that might be going into the second
I
power,
think
right?
so.
We'll talk
Yeah.
about next week
Yeah.
is that reliance. And just something to know about regret is that you don't need to do it alone, right? You don't need to
Hmm.
kind of uh, experience or witness your kind of regretful actions on your own. And
No.
one of the most curative and healing experiences I've had is by sharing some things with mama that I've been like regretful about that related to my training or related to him, related to kind of my relationship to the sangha, right? Like these kind of
Yeah.
maybe some negative thoughts about different
Yeah.
people, right? And so but being able to share those things and say, I regret this. I see how this is like hurting me and other people. And for him to just kind of open-heartedly, completely just have me there, right? And that there's no shunning.
No.
He's not going anywhere.
No,
Um,
he's a bit like Vajrasattva.
exactly. So being able to rely on those our teachers and and Vajrasattva
And our
and our
friends,
friends.
I get to admit my mistakes to you. I have a good friend in the Sangha that I go walking with once a week.
Yeah,
And when we go walking, it's at the end of the week, right? So Friday morning we go walking. And one of our most favorite activities is to review, not sort of like we're not saying like, oh, what is it that we regret, but just talking about like, oh my God, can you believe like this happened? I reacted like this. Can you see, like when we just to
yeah,
just share, we're just like sort of open, like look at this. And it's fun.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It is fun.
It
Yeah,
feels
we
good to
can
be
turn our mind
seen
that
and
way.
accepted, right?
Absolutely. Yes. I love that we can start to see it as like um the charge is taken out of it a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like, okay, I can regret without guilt or shame, because I know that like I'm gonna be accepted and that I can change. That is the cool thing about this practice is that
Yeah.
it's teaching us how we can change, and so I think that's really exciting.
We have changed, we are changing, and we'll continue to change.
That's right. Hell yeah. Well,
But
Daniel, thank you so much. This has been lovely. I'm very excited to be on this, journey of
yeah.
exploring the four opponent powers.
Thank you so
Um,
much for bringing the topic to our attention and for agreeing to do a four-parter on it. I think it's going to be invaluable.
yeah, absolutely. And for those listening, if you can make a donation to Lions Roar Dharma Center, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.